Oi, eu sou Marcelo Copello, estou na Sotheby com a Serena Sutclife, a diretora de avaliação de vinhos, ela que manda aqui nos vinhos da Sotheby. Serena, thank you very much for your time to receive me and to talk to all our friends in Brazil, the wine lovers in Brazil. And everybody wants to know, wine is a good investment?
Well, I prefer to think of wine as something that enhances your life, that gives you more pleasure in your life. I think that is more constructive than thinking of it as an investment. I mean, some people do combine them both by buying more wine than they need and perhaps selling some later, and that helps finance their drinking. But it isn't the part of work that we really like or recommend. I mean, we can't dictate what people do with their wine, but we much prefer to see wine lovers drinking their wine.
I agree. I love to buy wine and collect them and look at the bottles like babies at home, carry them and open them after a few years, after some years of keeping. Wine is very sensitive. Wine must be very well kept and very well chosen. How does Sotheby select wines?
Well, we have very strict criteria, very strict rules that we follow, that we set up ourselves as a kind of code of practice, whether we take something, whether we take a collection of wine, or whether we don't. And a good collection of wine has to fulfill various criteria. You know, obviously the quality of the wines, where they've been kept, if they're older wines, their whole life history, not just where they might have been for the last few years. So we have quite strict criteria. I mean, you might find sometimes with a very good collection of wine that most of it is fine and wonderful, but you won't be able to take a few of them because perhaps they're too old and past their best, and their levels have gone down too far in the bottle. But mostly, people who have very good collections of wine, they do look after them well.
And if I'm in Brazil and have some rare bottle, how can I sell it through Sotheby's? Just contact you and you evaluate?
We don't really sell bottles out of Brazil because our auctions are in London, New York and Hong Kong, and it would be extremely difficult to exit bottles from Brazil. So once they're in Brazil, that's where they are, where I think they should stay and where they should be enjoyed. It's a very difficult movement of wine to...
And do you have many Brazilians buying at Sotheby's? Brazilians are frequent buyers?
Yes, we have very, very good Brazilian clients, particularly from the two main cities, Rio and Sao Paulo. Very faithful clients, clients who absolutely love top French wines, which is what we primarily sell because that's the auction market. The retail market, and Sotheby's in New York is now in retail, is more, if you like, more varied. Although still, for us, it's very much dominated by French wines. But the auction scene, not just with us, but with other auction houses as well, is very dominated by top French wines.
Yes, they are the benchmarks.
Yeah, they are.
And about the other BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India and China, can you define a profile of the buyer?
Well, it's quite interesting because at the moment I'm reading lots of articles about how everyone's got to stop using this word BRICS because it's putting these countries which are so different one from another into a kind of group. I mean, I think right at the beginning it was useful because they were all emerging potential very rich countries and with huge growth, economic growth. But now it's almost misleading to talk about the BRICS because they have very little that links them in
totally different.
They're
Yes.
totally different. We obviously have a tremendous amount of clients in the Far East, in Asia in general, including obviously Hong Kong and mainland China, but also Taipei, Singapore, etc. So Thailand. So Asian clients are very important. Russian clients are important, particularly those Russians who have made their home in Europe, maybe in London, or they have a home in the south of France or something. And also, again, some Indians who are resident in Britain, because getting wines to India is not really feasible with their tax structures.
I interviewed you a few years ago, and I'm going to repeat the question. Is wine pleasure can have a price? When you buy a wine for such a high amount of money?
Well, I mean, if you like, my puritanical side says, when I look at some of the very high prices now paid for certain top wines, that nothing can give you as much pleasure that is really is equivalent to that price they've paid. I mean, you can get as much pleasure from a wine that maybe costs 1/10 of that, you know. So I think when wines are very expensive, other things kick in, such as rarity, desirability, maybe some snobism to say to your friends, "I've got it," you know. I think there's a limit. I mean, you can get real enjoyment sometimes from a relatively simple wine, but it depends on the mood and where you are.
And your wines, your unforgettable wines, the wines that give you more pleasure or that you haven't forgotten?
Oh, there's so many.
I know. Every time people ask me, and every time they ask, I change the answer.
Exactly.
You can change too.
Because there's new things you see all the time,
yes.
or the last time you saw something, it just made such a mark on you that, you know, that's how you feel.
What's on your mind now?
I mean, I have to say, La Tâche 1990 is just so beautiful, you know, and if you want just sheer beauty, that is very, very special. Then I tasted magnums of unbelievable champagne, Meurthe and Chandon, 1961 and 1959, in their cellars a few months ago. They were two of the greatest champagnes that I've ever tasted. So there's always new things.
Yes. Always new unforgettable things.
Yeah.
Make you perhaps forgetting other unforgettable things.
Well, that's it. I mean, they're all there, and it just depends on my mood.
And can you tell us some curious stories about auctions? There have been so many.
We have there are so many auctions all the time, particularly now with the three big centres. And there's a lot of funny stories. Each auction has funny stories, but most of which we can never tell anyone about. They're kind of internal folk history. But, you know, people are funny. An auction is a business that you never can quite predict what's going to happen. One of the sort of shocks I had a little while ago was I was on the telephone to a client who was bidding, and he was on his mobile and bidding and everything. And suddenly, to my horror, I saw him running into the sale room, still bidding with me on his phone, but also raising his hand to the auctioneer.
Bidding against him.
That's it. So I had to say, stop.
One thing we always see in movies is someone maybe scratching the ear and
then they get,
by mistake,
absolutely,
betting. This actually happens sometimes?
Not
or it's just folklore?
It's folklore, but you can make because normally you can see if somebody's serious or not, and you probably know them. Even in the wine world and the art world, you know a lot of the people. But it's quite amusing you can make a joke of it and say something like, "Are you bidding, sir, or just waving?"
But nobody ever bought by mistake anything.
Not really. I mean, if it's normally the auctioneer is so experienced, they know, but there's always plenty of time to say, no, I wasn't bidding, you know. But the vast majority of people know what they're doing.
And the critics influence auctions, or they influence more the ordinary wines?
I think auctions, which is what we call the secondary market, is very much dominated by people's own views, because the people, on the whole, who buy at auction do know something about the subject, and they have made up their mind what they want, what they like. There is far less critic importance in auctions than, for instance, in the Bordeaux Primeur campaign, which in fact this year looks slightly strange and is very is starting in quite a funny way. And I think that the Primeur campaign, the Futures campaign, is going to change in the future. But the secondary market is very much a market for, I hate using that word connoisseurs, but wine lovers who already know what they want, know what they're doing.
Doesn't matter if your pocket says 89 or 95. They want that wine.
Our clients really know what they want. And it usually is because they drink quite a lot with their friends, they make up their mind about their favourite wines.
Is there any new star rising, wine of New World wine, that's becoming more present in auctions that you can mention?
Not really. I mean, it is quite interesting. The auction world is quite conservative. It rests on the very great classics, which are principally from France, but there are a few really good wines from Tuscany and Piedmont in Italy, which fall into auction category. A few top Spanish wines. Australia is pretty well only Grange, which definitely goes into the category. California is interesting, again, where the auctions are concerned. Again, it's the top wineries that are important at auction, only the top ones. And they used to really only be important in our New York auctions. But some of the top ones are also now being very much appreciated in our Hong Kong auctions as well.
And what do you recommend from outside Europe? You mentioned Grange and California. And
Yeah,
could be a good investment?
I wouldn't, if you're thinking investment, don't go and be adventurous and buy all sorts of South African or New Zealand wines. By all means buy them and have a wonderful supper at home with friends. But if you're thinking investment, stick to the monuments, to the ones that are really known.
I was reading here, always when you talk about auctions, we talk about the top wines. But to buy middle range wines, maybe Bordeaux but not Premier, Bourgogne but not the Grand Crus, can be good investment, good buys.
They can be very good buys. They can be very, very good buys for filling your cellar, for getting some wonderful drinking wine. It's a pity when the market becomes too concentrated just on the very tops, like, as you said, first growths in Bordeaux, DRC in Burgundy. You have to look at other things, and it's quite interesting that even now Asians who started with perhaps just 10 big names, now suddenly they are learning about all sorts of different chateaux. They're learning about Rhone wines from the Rhone Valley, both northern Rhone and southern Rhone, and they will buy a Premier Cru or even a village wine if it's from a top producer in Burgundy.
So I have to ask you, this is our Wines of Brazil book. And I have to ask if you have tasted Brazilian wines.
I haven't for a long time, and I have a feeling that they've improved quite a lot.
Yes, this I can assure you.
I have a feeling I'm a bit out of date because they're not really, I don't see them when I'm in London or New York or Hong Kong, but I'm off to Brazil tomorrow.
Good, good.
And I'm going to take every opportunity to try and get up to date.
Yeah, here we tasted nearly 300 wines,
Yes.
so I have my recommendations here.
That will be very useful for me.
In very different categories,
Yeah.
sparklings, reds,
Yeah.
whites, especially sparkling wines, Brazil are very interesting.
Very interesting.
And do you think there's a niche in the wild world market for Brazilian wines?
Well, I mean, not necessarily at auction.
No,
I
not
think
at auction, I think
at
we are
auction,
far from that, yes.
Exactly. But if you're thinking about the high street shops and supermarkets and things, yes, if the quality and price are right. Because look what happened, you know, with, say, all the supermarkets in Britain and America, you know, how much Argentinian and Chilean wine they took. So it's a question of, you know, accessibility and the quality-price ratio.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can be right for the high street buyers and the supermarket buyers, particularly the British market is very open to everything.
Yeah, I think so. And I suppose you like music.
I do.
If Latache 1990 were a music, which one it will be for you?
Well, I think it would probably have to be something like a Schubert impromptu.
And who would be the pianist?
For me, it would be either Alfred Brendel or András Schiff.
Great, thank you very much. Muito obrigado.